Everybody, welcome to our briefing. Sophie. I believe this morning we are talking about land overdevelopment intentions, the survey results in our documents. So I will hand over to the authority at the end of the table.
Sorry, so we're going to talk until about 20 to 25 past, and then we're going out on a site visit to Kevlar. So we'll need to be prompt at wrapping up. So forgive me if we jump in and start wrapping up.
Thanks all. We did some survey stuff at the end of last year. This is just the first chance we've had at a committee or a council briefing to come back to this. We've had some other urgent things going on this year. So Ryan here will run through the survey, the process, the results, and we can have a good chat at the end as well about it. So here's Ryan.
So last year in December, the strategy team undertook a survey to understand development intentions of owners of large parcels of urban zone land. This essentially helps us to understand what's going on in our townships and to understand the housing development capacity as required by the National Policy Statement, but also for other development types like commercial, industrial, retirement home style development. So land identified was sized 2,000 square metres and over, that's urban zoned and not yet developed at scale. So we identified approximately 4.9 million square metres of land owned by 630 landowners, and we heard from 127 of them. So this covered nearly 1 million square metres of land. It's about 1/5 of the total amount of land that we identified across the district. So we now have a good idea of what those people want to do. Obviously, a big limitation is that we didn't hear from 80% of landowners, and their intentions are still unknown to us. Also noting we did this in December last year, so we might have gotten a slightly lower return than what we might have gotten at other times of the year. So looking at the spread across the district, the majority sits in Rolleston, which is understandable, with nearly half of all identified land. A big chunk of the rest is within the other 5 largest towns in the township network, so quite a large portion within Prebbleton, and just over a 1/5 position within the smaller towns such as Sheffield, Springston. The land identified and the responses were spread across the district. The lowest percentage of identified land that returned surveys was in Prebbleton. We're now aware of the intentions of about 11% of that identified land over 6 landowners. Conversely, in places like Darfield, we had responses by owners over 50% of the land, with only 2 survey responses. This makes it slightly more challenging to extrapolate the results to the wider population with similar consistency. For this reason, the analysis focused more on what the results say about the land, rather than making more general assumptions. However, at the very end, we've got all the data and the analysis that we have undertaken, which will help us with the future methodology for further surveys. So that's the key survey findings there. So in the short to medium term, about 4.6% intend to develop their land each year. So just over 23% intend to develop at scale over the next 5 years. Within the longer term, there's a larger share of 53.8% who are unsure. And then in the coming 20 to 30 years, a share of these will become developable. And just over a quarter do not intend to develop at any time. So more importantly, the main themes that were raised, there are a number of real and perceived barriers to developing land. The subdivision process came up as a bit of an overarching issue. We've got really good resources on our website. We've got our duty planner to assist, but a lot of people were just confused by the subdivision process. Either they just didn't know they could actually subdivide or have this perceived belief that it's a complex process that they either didn't have the time to do or just weren't ready to have a go at it. But once we actually discuss with these people, provide them links to the website, help them with the district plan, these people are verbally much more open to looking into subdivision. This also relates a little bit to the medium density residential standards and the rezoning to medium density in the new district plan, where a lot of people didn't even know subdivision was now an option. Another big theme was right-of-ways. It confuses a lot of people in Eastern Selwyn because we've got a lot of large properties on a right-of-way, because previously, under the old district plan, right-of-ways had a limit of 6 properties that could access that right-of-way. But with the new medium density residential standards and rezoning to medium density, each of those 6 properties can now have 3 each. Also with infrastructure, a mix of real and perceived barriers, as there are specific townships where water and wastewater infrastructure capacity is an issue that makes it more challenging to develop and subdivide. This is the likes of Taitapu, Sheffield and Hororata. And others just currently have things underway with council and are working with us to overcome issues already. So in terms of our ongoing work, we've worked through most of the landowners and resolved the quick matters that we can resolve easily, but there are some that have very specific challenges that need site-specific support that takes time. I touched on infrastructure capacity before, but there are some that just have unrealistic expectations. There was one landowner in Rolleston who's waiting for us to permit apartments so they can build condo towers. So there's a few unrealistic expectations. But others can only be resolved with suitable justification by their consultant team and engineers that would usually be done through the usual consenting processes. Specifically, there was one on Leaston who knows what they need to do. Council's assisted them previously. They just need to come back to council with the revised consent, but they're just not interested doing that right now. A lot of these owners still have land that we have identified as being feasible and that we reasonably expect to be realised. So we're going to continue working with them over the next few months and assist them if they want to through the process. But also the strategy team is working with the wider organisation on these potential barriers and focusing on a resolution approach. This will hopefully unlock the capacity in those existing urban areas and reduce the need to provide for that additional development capacity through rezoning of rural land. And also we'll continue to survey the district to understand the development intentions and to build on these learnings and undertake hopefully a future survey in the future, which will include a broader spectrum of development options so we can understand a bit more of those finer details.
Yeah, it was a really important piece of work for us to do to kind of start to understand what's happening within the existing urban areas of our townships. We know what we can model what we think might be feasible in these areas, but it's really trying to understand what the landowners are wanting to do or are able to do, and then finding out from them what their perceived issues with that or their lack of knowledge or what we need to help them to get through that process. So that's been really helpful in this process. So we hopefully can keep doing more of these to understand how they're feeling as well and help them through any of those perceived barriers or figure out what constraints we may have out there that we may not have realised, especially that right-of-way issue around trying to intensify down right-of-ways. That is a kind of ongoing thing to figure out. So that is the survey results. I think they're all in that report there for you to have a review of. It'd be interesting to hear from you if you've heard from people out there, if you've got any questions on the survey itself or what you're hearing from people out there about some of the intensification discussions or what they are feeling like they can achieve or not achieve, or does this kind of match what you're feeling is happening? So yeah, over to the floor.
Thank you, Ben. It's very interesting. I myself have had a few existing ratepayers concerned that the properties around them are being developed and like sunlight, recession plains, etc., access to right-of-ways and sort of thing. So that's the feedback I've been getting, not from the developer, from those being developed beside. So, Nicole.
I want to go and just dig in a little deeper about the right-of-way issue because I personally live down a right-of-way and Sophie does as well. So to be like when we're looking at, I'm not sure with the space for vehicles. Our situation where we are, it's 6 sections, but only 5 of them are developed, and there has been times where there has been issues with cars wanting to go either way and down it. I've actually had just last week where I was trying to turn from middle of Lowe's Road halfway across and realised that there's a car coming up the driveway. She should have reversed, but she's an interesting character. She didn't, so I'm trying to manoeuvre on the road to avoid her coming out at me. So, and this is a situation that we've got now. I can't get my head around how when we're looking to do with MDRS. So I'm interested to know, like, I was obviously involved in the transport section with that district plan. So that was, though, when we were doing that was before the MDRS then came through. So there was not approving that, there was not the thought that where we would end up at that time. So are we looking to do even a plan change or anything? I mean, how are we looking to approach it? Because this is actually going to be quite a serious issue.
Yeah, good question, Nicole. I mean, if this is going to become, well, it will become more and more often, we're going to see traffic issues. Perhaps we need to do some public education or some neighbour etiquette around such things.
Yeah, I think for us, the initial step was to sort of realise that this is a key issue, and if we're to enable or support intensification in these towns, like what do we need to do to these right of ways in a strategic sense in the first instance, like, or what are they to support that? For the district plan stuff, I think we did the MDRS change. I think what the government's signalling is there is a next step coming that we could revisit that and all the process with that, but that is still to be put into legislation and passed through the process. So we have to figure out that district plan stuff then. But I think the conversation is around if this land up these right of ways is where intensification can occur, what do we need to do on top of that to make these not right of ways? Do we need to do something else? But we'll have to do that on such a site by site process and figure all that out. But I think this stuff here highlighted that's a key issue for us to figure out, to be able to make more of this land able to be developed.
Can I speak to more of this? Particularly bigger, I bring up my issue because 4 of the sections are 1,000 squares and the other 2 are bigger again. So this is actually ripe for intensification. And I'm not arguing against intensification because someone who's living where I am, which is so close to Foster Park, to all the shops and everything, is ripe for intensification. But I just, now that we're in that, where we are now, where there could be 18 houses with however many cars, it is actually quite a serious issue when we're talking about just a bulk standard normal driveway width that would go into a single house. Yeah, it needs a much bigger thought, but thanks for that. And I'm happy to discuss offline about that as well, about, particular issues I see.
I think that we'll need to have that conversation in those area plan stuff at that point to sort of say, well, these right of ways may need to become not private. They may need to do something else to enable that stuff. But that's just a thought now. It's not something we're proposing yet.
Ben, I'm aware that doing the variations and things we have to do has cost us a lot of money. And it seems to me that when you foreshadowed that there's more changes coming, we could see more costs being borne by the ratepayer. I'm concerned as to these right-of-ways, and if we have to alter them to facilitate the density increases, are we able to take costs for that off the developers?
Yeah, that will be how we have to figure out, is that what we want? And then how do we actually do it? So that will be something we'll have to discuss later on. And with the variation change in the government announcements, once we know what they're asking of us and the options we have in front of us, that we'll have to come back here to say, how do we approach that? But those things are signalled for mid-25 once the legislation has changed. But
we certainly have to keep that in mind, because I'm sure our ratepayers don't want to bear the expense of upgrading right-of-ways for the benefit of a few. Deborah.
Thank you. Look, I just want to make a comment on these right-of-ways and question whether those that have larger sections of these right-of-ways don't actually have medium density housing options put on them. The reason being is that originally, some of those right-of-ways used to be able to have 10, 11 houses off a right-of-way. There were always been concerns from regards to emergency services getting down to these right-of-ways. That's why many of them tend to have, as Nicole's just mentioned, the larger sections from the original densities of 800 to 1,000. These right-of-ways are not in council ownership either. Quite often they are, I can't think of the word now. Private right-of-ways in which every landowner has a portion of the ownership, responsibility and maintenance of that right-of-way. So they're not necessarily council's right-of-ways. And a lot of them are narrow. We've taken them down to a maximum of 5 or 6, but there's still some larger ones sitting there with probably 10 or 11. And from a feasibility perspective, if you've got 1 or 2 landowners in there who don't want to subdivide, right, then that right of way just stays as it is, depending on how the covenants is actually written up, unless the, so you've got a whole lot of ownership difficulties with regards to the right of ways. And, I mean, my feeling is that these are not right for medium density housing situations, with regards to future subdivision, and that's where you need to actually consider. If it's a large section, say a 5,000 square metre section or a 2,500 square metre section that's sitting, in this area, if they want to subdivide, let them put in an accessible road. That becomes in council ownership, that is actually transferred to council ownership. And that makes it, that'll make it a lot easier.
This is further down the track.
You're
jumping there.
I think what this work has highlighted is that that's a key issue for us to figure out, and we probably need to work with people on that right away to say, do you want to intensify here, because we'll need to come up with a better solution than a private right away, or is it, do you not want to do it, and maybe we need to consider that not as capacity in the future as well, and have to think of alternatives around that. So yeah.
Now,
okay, we've only got 7 minutes before we get on the bus, and we're talking about things that are in the ether at the moment. Sophie.
Yeah. Thank you very much. It's quite interesting. I wish those other 80% of people had come back to us, but we've got time. This is a really good start. So, it'd be interesting to see if the trend changes or carries on from these guys. I was just going to mention about the right-of-ways. Yes, I live up one as well. And I have spoken to my neighbours about it, because we're all on like 900,000 squares. And the only solution that we came up with so far is that actually if somebody was able to bank up a certain amount for that portion that's set back behind a bunch of houses, or include, one of the frontage houses on the main road and all that, and just do something like what Green Homes have been building out at Ackland Park, like do it as a larger section that's much better laid out than you're ever going to get by just lumping 3 houses on the top, basically, because then you can sort your bins, your vehicles, whatever else. And I just wanted to clarify, because you mentioned about the guy with the apartments and the condo towers. Low-rise apartments are okay though, aren't they? It's just not like 6-story towers that you meant. Yeah, thank you.
Grant.
Just a clarification of that last comment, Sophie. I think the densities they're talking about are up to between 100 and 150 to hectare, isn't it? Which will require multi-level apartments, won't it? Well, we can't just do it in apartments, can we? That's the level of intensity they're talking about, which is quite challenging for Ralston. But let's just park that bit of it anyway. But I had 3 specific pieces of feedback. 2 were from developers that had applied to do developments, 1 commercial and 1 for residential, and being turned down by the council through the hearing process. So they were highly frustrated that we were looking at development intentions when they said, we want to develop, you turned us down. So they were pretty annoyed. The second thing is that we only got 19%. And the feedback was that, why would I tell the council or my competitors what my development intentions are? And so that may be something to do with the low turnout, because there's a perceived competitive advantage in not telling your supermarkets are classics for that. We know ourselves, don't we? So.
Yeah, it's trying to probably capture just those people that have over 2,000 square meters. So it could be a lot of people that have been here for a while that have those larger sites, and trying to understand that maybe they could put other houses on there, and that's capacity that we think is feasible, but are they actually wanting to do that or not? And so it's really trying to understand who owns the land, what they're aiming to achieve, and it's only the stuff that should be zoned for development now. It's not anything that's not zoned to be rezoned. It's, so yeah, we're just trying to understand like what we hear. Like maybe this stuff is feasible, but are people actually doing this or wanting to do this or and that? And it's just the start of a conversation that we want to kind of keep going on that. Yeah, but it's a challenge.
Thanks for your input, Megan.
Yeah, kia ora. So I have a couple of points or a couple of questions. So as I understand it, this work is being done because the district plan has actually now almost complete, appeals put aside, and the panels have decided what's going to be zoned where. When I looked into the district plan, that mostly was the living zones, L1, L2, that you're focusing on, like these particular living zones that you're trying to encourage development of, that's zoned that way. So it's not a plan change, like probably some of that feedback that Grant got, right, because it was outside of the zones.
Yeah. So we're just looking at the stuff that's already residentially zoned.
Yeah.
That is big enough to have multiple houses on it to understand whether people wanted to do that now or not. Because the NPSUD says you need to know what's feasible. So we can figure out what's feasible. We can run a kind of model to say that. But whether people are wanting to do it or not is the other element to consider alongside that. And so this is just trying to start that, understand whether people are willing to do that, or if they're not, we have to start thinking about alternate ways to look at capacity and stuff.
Yeah, because you have plan-enabled development, right? We've got a good plan that enables development. So you're now taking it to the next level to say, well, is this reasonably practical? And if the answer that you're getting back from the community is actually no, then it has to look at, well, how do we actually release more land, or what land, right? No, so understanding that's the context, then I think the land surveys are great, but there probably needs to, if people are saying that they're confused about the rules and look, I do this for a living and I found it confusing, but you know, that's not unusual. Every district plan is confusing. So I'm just wondering if there should be some type of more proactive way to engage, to say these are the things you can do on this land, and I don't know if there's any actually money in the budget to do it, but that's a much more better, or that's a better way of spending your dollar than doing a plan change later down the track. So I'd encourage that.
Yeah, so I think doing the survey highlighted those things that we pointed out around people's confusion about how to do it, and the issues around whether there is infrastructure, and just generally helping people through it. And we've caught up with a bunch of people that have said in the survey, yes, can we talk about it? So we've talked through their specific ones, but I think it's highlighting those general issues that I think Ryan touched on, that we need to sort of put more out there about how you do this, what's the process to do it, so it makes it a little bit less scary for them to start or have the conversation. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, you've certainly, we've got a complicated web to sort, and I do support Megan's suggestion, and that we do need to give a roadmap or perhaps a right of way of how they can do it. I couldn't resist. Thank you, Ryan, for your presentation. It was good graphics and easy to comprehend. So, no other questions, councillors, on that? None at the moment. Okay. Thank you very much, councillors. We're going to get in the van shortly to go and see